We are families, we are caregivers, we are parents to children with disabilities and medical complexities. We are rarely familiar. We get together to learn, to relate, and to laugh a lot while we share each other's unique family experiences of raising the rarest of the rare. Our goal is to unite, inspire, educate, and empower people living a rarely familiar life. And we're so glad you're here. Welcome to Rarely Familiar. This is Haley. I'm here with my friend Tram, where we dig into the realities of raising the rarest of the rare. Today, we're going to get familiar with emergency planning, in particular from a rural perspective. One of our friends that we've met recently. But before that, Tram, we have another rare occasion that happened to us. Well, Jen isn't here again today because she is still in a bit of a crisis with Julian, but the silver lining that I was in with Felix getting some labs done. I'm at Gillette. I'm texting Tram. Tram's like,
I made a last minute appointment to get Sadie's AFOs because she was off school because she had a GI issue. And so I was like, you know what, let me see if I can pick up her AFOs since she's off school. So we ended up at Gillette and I was like, Haley, are you here? Because you said you were going to do urgent care today. And ironically, like we said, Jen is in crisis mode with Julian. He's in rehab inpatient at Gillette. And Haley's texted Jen, I'm going to go see her.
Maybe we can go see her. We were just getting some labs for Felix. It was nothing urgent.
Yeah.
But Jen's like, yeah, come on over. So we went into the rehab wing, the circus of all of us going down the hall and into Jen's room with Julian. And we got an adorable picture of the six of us, which the last time we had the six of us together was over a year ago. It just doesn't happen. And it was just very unplanned.
Because to get our calendars of the six of us together is hard. We made Julian laugh and smile. And so it was nice to have him smile and laugh. And so Sadie got a good laugh.
So smiling. I think just having the three of them there's a camaraderie that our kids share with each other. And when they're in the presence of each other, it's something special.
Really is. So, and I think we gave a little bright spot to Jen, which, as we all know, being inpatient is hard. So.
You need your people. You absolutely need your people. We've been in communication with her and she's going to come on and share her story, but she had an emergency. And that is exactly what we're here to talk about today. We'll probably keep talking about this because it's so important. We are here today with Morgan Klatt to talk about emergency planning, but Morgan lives far away from the city. Gosh, I can't remember the name. So she's going to introduce herself. Embarrass, Minnesota. Morgan and I met, I think we met virtually on email. We were doing something in complex care at Gillette. And she was like, I have all this information to share on emergency planning. And it wasn't on the agenda for that team to tackle at the moment. And I just started having a little bit of a relationship with Morgan. And we actually ended up meeting. What if you happen to be inpatient with your daughter, Annie? And I'm like, what can I bring you? I'm going to come over and say, hi, I'm here too. And another chance encounter when we're all at the same place together. And I think you said, bring me donuts. And I'm like, okay, sure, I can do that. And I came over with donuts. And that was my first introduction to Morgan. And we have been talking ever since. And now Tram, Morgan, and I are all in the Partners in Policymaking program together. So we're getting to know Morgan a lot more and getting to see her once a month, which is awesome. So Morgan, I'm going to have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your tie-in to the disability community. Then give us a little fun fact. And then we'll go into some of the tips and tricks and things that you've learned and want to share with the greater community.
Thank you for that introduction. It has been fun. And yes, it was donuts. I think that it just switched and they had those like true mini donuts and they're so delicious. It's the one bright spot of being inpatient. So my daughter, Adeline, she's 17 years old, actually a senior in high school this year. She is medically complex, and I won't go through all of the diagnoses, but we could just basically say that she's dependent on us for all things. And we've had a lot of ups and downs with health issues and different things. I also have 3 other children. My 15-year-old has some medical issues as well. And our youngest little guy, who we're actually officially adopting on December 20th. Yeah.
Congratulations.
He's going to have some of his own little struggles too, but we just have a good time. And we do live in Embarrass, Minnesota. We have a little hobby farm. And I also teach kindergarten up here. And so I work with a lot of families that are in the school, but also might have some special needs for their children as well. My fun fact is that I used to be a hog farmer. I moved to Iowa chasing my husband, and he was a hog farmer. So that's what I became.
An Iowa hog farmer.
An Iowa hog farmer.
Yeah.
I worked with an Iowa hog farmer for 10 years. Well, a former, he grew up as an Iowa hog farmer. Yeah.
Oh, the Iowans are big with the pork
like their pig.
industry. My husband and I did rag bry, and so we found Mr. Pork Chop's truck on the rag bry ride. That was many moons ago when I was healthy. So
I have been around for a couple of those rag bry. The parties are really good after that.
they are good. And then you also have another interesting fun fact that you told us that I think is sort of funny.
So when I am not taking care of my children, I do tend to like to let loose a little bit. And my friend and I were
No.
my friend and I were at a concert with 90s music, and we actually rushed the stage, and we were on stage with Vanilla Ice dancing to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle song, which I can't remember what the
Okay,
title.
this recently, or is this?
Oh gosh, this was 2018, I think.
Oh my gosh.
Good for you. rushing the
We
stage.
need to get out. We need to get our groove on every now and then, right?
Those are
Yes.
great fun facts.
So I remember when you were inpatient with Addie, and you're like, I brought this, and you showed me this amazing binder that you had put together. When we start to talk about emergency planning, having things all written down, it is amazing. But why did you decide to do that and create that? Other than the fact that you're a school teacher.
Like I said, Addie is 17.
Mhm.
So in 2015, let's see, Addie would have been 8 years old. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was not, I mean, all cancer is bad, but it wasn't, we were able to go through all the treatments and everything. But I started thinking during that time, oh my gosh, my husband would have no clue what to do. He wouldn't know who to
Not alone.
call. He wouldn't know who to reach out to.
Oh.
I mean, he'd figure it out, but like everything for care for my daughter is in my head, and
Mhm.
it's my routine.
Mm.
So I created this binder with the intent of having something for him to reference. And that is what kind of started the emergency preparedness planning in my head.
It was you
before-
thinking, if I'm not here, what happens? I feel the same way in our house. And I'm trying slowly but surely to get the information out of my head, send him to more appointments so that it can be shared, and so that you are not the keeper of all the information, because that's not a good thing, right? We need to share the load, or at least have it somewhere else so
Yep.
someone else can pick it up.
So Morgan, what's in the binder?
So in the binder, I'm going to just go page by page here, but I've got an emergency care plan that we set up with the care team at Gillette. And this is specifically for being in a rural area. We've learned recently in the last few years that if we have to call 911 because they're telling us we can't just, I used to just get in the vehicle and drive with all the equipment and like just get there. That's not a good idea anymore. And so we came up with this emergency care plan because we figured out I call 911 and there's a lot of stops along the way.
Yeah.
There's closest facility procedures. There's just people don't know who we are. So we get in the ambulance. And if I start barking that I want to go to Duluth, they're going to look at me like I'm a crazy person.
Mhm.
So we worked really hard with local emergency units. and also with the providers from Gillette to come up with a plan and to do a meet and greet, which is something I can talk about later, to let them know who we are, what interventions we have at our disposal here at our home. What would it take for us to call 911? And then if I say, can we go to Duluth? It's not just me asking because I want to ask. It's because I really have some meat behind it. So that is the front and center page.
And a reason for choosing that location over whatever location they would typically go to. So you start to be like, give the directions versus them saying, hey, this is what we normally do.
Right. And we also have her pulmonary care plan in here. We've got her nutrition plan. We have her pulsed form in here, which is the provider orders for life-sustaining treatment. I've got all the emergency contacts listed. I've got a medication schedule, so it lists what we give at what times during the day. I've got all of her medications, which I update regularly. I have all the reasons why those medications are given also, because sometimes that's important for people to know too. Like food pump information, baptism pump information. I've got baseline information. If a first responder were to come and listen to my daughter breathing, they would be really shocked because she is crackly and junky. That's baseline for her. So we've got that information in there. I've got her backlets and pump information, all of her doctors and specialists listed, and all of her home suppliers as well.
I'm curious, all of the doctors and specialists, like, how many are we talking here? It's at least
a lot. 15, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's a whole page, if that tells you anything.
And I think that's something in common that all of us share is that we see all of the specialists.
And it's really interesting because, like I said, in the last couple of years, we have done some different things with being transported by ambulance and doing the meet and greet and getting to know people. It was interesting to sit down with them, show them the binder, and have them give their perspective on what would be interesting or pertinent for them to know about the care of our daughter. And also, it's a great training tool. If you have someone new coming into your house, you can just slide the binder over to them and start going page by page. Because
New
there's
PCAs, new nurses, new,
there's so much information. It's very overwhelming. And then also, it has become just a thing too, going to the doctor's office. Instead of me trying to go through all the med list and everything else, they ask me now, do you have your binder with you? Well, of course I do. So here you go. It has become a very nice tool.
What is nice about creating the binder, you can use this for every day, right? So when school orders have to go in at the beginning of the year, or when you go to have a doctor's appointment, like you said, like every time I go to every specialist, can you update her meds? Has she gotten a new diagnosis? I think that creates that ability to have it right there, because then also when emergencies stay, now you're staying inpatient, you have a whole new list of doctors that you don't meet because it's whoever's on the floor that day, right? So I think having that in there, because I'm literally always, her formula is mixed with these two things, or here's her medication and here's the time. So that's awesome, because then you could just give it to them, because I think it is a lot. And doctors miss things when they're new on an inpatient floor, right? Because they pick whatever, right? They rotate where they don't know you. So it is nice to have that all there. Now, you mentioned that you went and met with your EMS team and you brought this binder, which also then almost worked as an agenda. Talk to me why you went to go meet with your EMS team and what happened in that meeting.
I'll start by explaining what prompted the meet and greet is that, so like I said, in the last year or almost 2 years now, things have gotten a bit more emergent for us. We are right on the edge of 4 different services in our area because we decided to live in the woods to run our hobby farm, and it's not a super convenient place for EMS. When we had a couple instances where we had to call 911, I got a first responder first. And he comes in and he's listening to Addie, and you could see his eyes getting really big. And then he said, "Tell me the underlying issues." And having to call 911 while I'm managing my 3 other kids because they're now upset because we're not used to going on the ambulance. I've got crying, I've got barking dogs, I've got calling my husband, letting him know what's going on. And then you want me to tell you what the underlying issues are for my daughter when you are not ultimately the person that's going to care for her. I don't have time for that.
Right.
And then the EMTs showed up, which the EMTs wanted to know the same thing, but we weren't going to be transported by EMTs. We were going to be transported by paramedics, which they were just a few minutes away. And then once we got into the paramedic unit, then we got transported to the closest facility, which is 20 miles away, where that doctor just walked in and said, "We're not dealing with her here. We're not a pediatric unit. You're going to Duluth." So then we got into an ambulance with different paramedics, and we rode an hour and a half to get to Duluth, where we were put inpatient there. And while we were inpatient there, most of the doctors were very good about communicating with her usual providers in the cities. Had one provider who came in and he said, "No, we're not doing this." And I was very upset and said, "You have not been with her for the last 16, 17 years. You're not going to change it. Please talk to providers from
The people that know us. Yeah.
yes." And so there were several disconnects there. There was the disconnect of everybody wanting to know everything, not able to or not in a headspace to share that. Having to do all those different stops and
Yeah.
then getting to Duluth because we know we can't go to the cities, but getting to Duluth and then having to explain to them, "She's already got all these care plans in place. Please listen to us and communicate."
So it sounded the process was so disjointed. And so what you're hoping to do now is streamline that process so that they can be on the call with somebody from Gillette while you're en route to Duluth to say, "Hey, this is how you're going to treat this human." It's terribly unfortunate that you had to go through that. It's awful. But what did you learn?
So
How did you change things? Did you?
I contacted my friends at Gillette, and we have a wonderful complex peds nurse there who helped start this process of creating this emergency care plan. Um, and she suggested that I just go and have a conversation with some of these people. And she didn't know if they would actually want to do that. But anyway, she was contacting the ALS unit. I was contacting the paramedic unit. Then we ended up talking to this wonderful human there who set me up with 3 days. So I met with the 3 different crews of people. I was just able to share our story and let them know that these were all the things that we were doing and just helping have them meet us at our level of understanding. If I show up at this woman's house, there is a reason why she's asking for what she's asking for, and we have some knowledge of what we could be stepping into. And those 3 days of training actually led to me going to the 3 other units that are near us. Just being able to have a conversation with the people that work on the ambulance. It was fantastic. I still see those people out and about while I'm seeing stuff, and they'll ask me about Addie, and they're like, "You haven't called lately. Everything's going good." And it's nice because
Yeah.
we have just started building that relationship.
And they're a part of your community, right? Like you're gonna run into them. It's where you are. It's a small town. But
Let's take a step back because I think, we take it for granted because you've been doing it now. So I think help the listeners understand. So when you say a first responder came out there and then the EMT and then the paramedic, people don't know the difference. So can you help explain that from what you know, even if you're not the expert, but explain it
we're
from
all
the
just trying to
layman's term?
learn.
Yeah.
in any area, but particularly from our experience, the first responders are the people who just have basic training. They just know how to come out and call for the right people. They take blood pressures, monitor,
CPR.
Assessing the situation. Okay.
Yep. So very basic training. The next level is the EMTB, which those units are kind of all over up here. They're a little bit more in depth with their knowledge of what to do in an emergency situation. Some of our services up here have variances to be able to provide like IV placement, or they have variances to provide different other life-saving measures that typically maybe an EMT wouldn't have access to.
Right.
And then the paramedic unit, they have usually a full gamut of whatever would need. They're
They can
kind
do
of like
more
the top tier.
life-saving tactics where
Yes.
they can do prescription meds and IV administrations and more life-saving, high level and more schooling.
And
Mhm.
typically, too, up here, they're the ones that are not on a volunteer unit. Our EMTBs and our first responders are on volunteer units. So that makes a big difference, too, if people are available or not.
Great. So that helps a lot. I know something else that you and I have talked about in the past because when I met you at Partners in Policy and you said that you lived in Embarrass, and I was like, how is that having to go 2 hours to get to the children's clinic? And you had made mention that, yep, I rolled in with my vehicle to meet with these people. And so it was part of the discussion points that you had. Can you walk us through what else they talked about with you when you were in the bay with them?
In the Bay, you mean your first responder. And so you were literally driving your van into their location.
Yep. So when I went to go do the 3 days of training in Virginia with all the paramedics, they actually had me drive into the ambulance bay because where their meeting room is not handicap accessible. So there was no way I was getting Addie up there.
Right.
It just happened that we pulled into the ambulance bay. They had all the chairs set up. And as I'm talking and we're going through the book and people are asking questions, when we were wrapping up, the first group, they just walked over and started looking at our van. And an interesting topic came up out of that because they climbed in and they're like, okay, guys, we find them on the side of the road. How are we going to get them out of the vehicle? They were like climbing inside of the vehicle and opening everything up and really working over, oh my gosh, there's not two doors. And the ramp that we have is a big brawn lift. So it folds up and it's this big piece of metal that's in the way of the door. How would we get Addie out?
So your
And
ramp van, it folds out versus tuck under. Like
Correct.
mine comes out from underneath, yours folds up. Okay. So then it blocks the door. Got it.
it locks the door. And we have a full size van.
Mhm.
And there's just not a lot of access points to it, which is not something we thought about when purchasing the van.
Mhm.
But it prompted a really interesting discussion with the
Yeah.
paramedics. And so each team of people that I met with, they all took a look at the vehicle and gave me some pointers there too, as far as where to put like placards with Addie's
Mhm.
medical information. They said, don't put things in the window because windows break out. So you're going to
Wow.
lose the stickers. Put things in multiple places. So in her van, we have a medical information sign that we have zip tied to the back of the seats. We've got one
Mhm.
zip for a chair.
Mhm.
Um, and they were trying to think about if they had come upon us in a crash, where
Yeah.
would be the best place to put it.
And when you say that you zip tie these things, so example, because she's nonverbal, they wouldn't know some of the diagnoses. Obviously, they would see her in her wheelchair. They would see some visible things. What do you mean when you say you zip tied her medical onto the chair?
What I zip tied is it's literally just an emergency information inside my daughter's back. It's basically like a medical alert bracelet,
Oh,
but it's on a piece of red paper and I laminated it and I just zip tied it in different places. So again, it's
Mhm.
red. It's like a
Mhm.
medical alert bracelet and it lets them know that her information is inside the backpack on the back of her chair.
Does this have medication in it too? Does it have?
This is the binder that I was talking about.
Okay. Okay.
That binder with all of the information is in the back of her chair, and that's what it's hopefully going to direct them to.
Perfect. Okay, that helps a lot because I often think like, all right, fine, I'm unconscious or I can't talk. What do they need to know about Sadie? And so and she doesn't wear a medical bracelet because she's always rubbing herself, and so that makes so much more sense to have it labeled. Here's the emergency medical information. Look here, so that you can find the information. That's awesome tidbit. You live in the middle of nowhere, according to city folk people. So you live in the middle of nowhere. So tell me, what are some other things that you have done outside of like the binder and the planning? Are there things that you do at home? They can't ship that item in a certain, do I need to hoard those items? What do you do to protect yourselves? Because you guys get a ton of snow up there. You're in small town roads. Is there other things that you do to help plan at home?
Yes, actually, we recently moved into a new home in 2020, actually during COVID. And we were fortunate enough to be able to look at some of the emergency preparedness type stuff because that was going through my head. Like I said, this has just been a progression. We were able to do some different planning, like as far as where we live, if there was some kind of a disaster, what would be the best thing for us? Would we be able to pick up everything and get out of the house fast and just be able to leave? For our situation, no. So we talked a lot about sheltering in place and being able to understand that we would need certain things like a backup generator. Our area, we lose power a lot. So when we made this move, it was really important to us to have that alternate power source because Addie does a lot of breathing treatments. And if she needs oxygen and there are just so many components, it was like we cannot be without
Oh,
power.
without power, the power went out here this summer sometime for like 24 hours, and we were freaking out. You don't realize the amount of stuff, even in their bedroom, that we have plugged in. Like, we need an electrician to come in and be like, okay, we need more power in this room because there's so much. So, absolutely a generator. Like, that to me is just like a number one check, must have.
Yeah, it was very interesting to realize how many things, if power does go off, like how many things you rely on for care and monitoring and things. The other thing is that we dedicated a room in our house to having the option of being like our shelter in place room. So this is a room that we can go into. It's got extra locks on the door and it's got like our emergency radio, emergency flashlights where you can put a go bag. I have not been very good about leaving the go bag in this room. But it's just a place where we would be able to go. And when we talk as a family about what our emergency plan would be, that's something that we discuss with our kids. You go to this room when these things are happening. If there's a fire or something, obviously we're getting out of the house. Um, but like our boys are old enough and big enough now where we can have these conversations about something happened to mom and dad. This is what we need you to do with Addie. And I feel like being able to have this conversation as a family has been so helpful. Just making everything feel a lot better about at least we've talked about it and have a plan.
That's serious high level planning. That's like A++ plan.
But it is true. This goes to the discussion even at schools or whatever, or even in our house, Haley, the elevator goes out, right? You usually shelter in place for tornadoes down in your basement or a place where there's no windows. And I was like, ooh, the elevator's now out. What are we doing? So are we just hanging out in the elevator room?
What
Or,
if you're in the elevator when all the power goes out?
Having those discussions when you have other children you need to care for, like for Haley, you have Felix, your boys are much older, they get it, right? They're like college age. But for you, you have other smaller children that you have to worry about. So that makes total sense that you should have these conversations, but not, it's hard to also not scare them and make them anxious.
Like,
So,
mom, what terrible things are you thinking are going to happen to us?
yeah, no, that is awesome information because it is true in your areas, you guys get piled on snow. You're
Oh my
way
gosh,
up
you can
north
get stuff.
and lines go down and it's in the woods, so the electrical work is not getting done so quickly with the amount of population you have up there too.
Correct. The other thing is that we really have done a lot of work with is having those extra supplies, having a medical supplier from down in the cities.
Mm.
Um, all of our medical equipment comes from the cities. We ran into a couple situations where we were out of something and it's like, God, what do I do? Our local hospitals don't even carry it.
And for us, for trauma night, it's like, oh, I got to run to PHS, it's 20 minutes away. But for you,
Yes.
it could be days.
And so what we did is we talked with PHS, and one of the parent tips that I have is ask your home supplier what is the max amount of items that you can get every month, because sometimes that there's like a number but then there's like a top number, and have the conversation with them about how many times can I use that max number to be able to have some kind of a cushion.
Yep.
That was really important for us to be able to talk with PHS about that.
Or
Also,
even for going on a trip or anything, like to be able to have that little buffer. Yeah. I've
exactly.
recently put my husband in efforts to try and give him more things to do. I put him in charge of ordering. And that was the first thing he did. He looked the max amount I can order. So now we have all this stuff. And
There is another issue. Yes.
It's the storage. Yeah.
Yes.
all that stuff.
The other thing is we talk to our doctors about having a backup food pump or a backup suction machine, because if our
Yep.
food pump goes down, it's at least 24 hours with good weather for us to get a new one. And then
Yeah.
there's all these things that can go along with bolus feeding after you've been doing a continuous feed situation. Or like the suction machine. How do I suction my daughter if the machine goes down? The doctors were able to do a little advocating for us, and we actually have backup equipment
Is there like a
that
manual suction thing you could like? No, nothing like that. Okay. I don't
the
know.
only thing I can think of is like a bulb syringe, but
That's what I'm thinking. Like you like kind of like how you would do it.
yes, but yeah, so there's some extra things that
Think
that
about
you
like
can
how that would work. Right.
She's thinking of like a regular able-bodied infant with the nose booger suction. I'm like,
Thinking about her. We
there are
have such-
gas and
I know.
an aspirin.
I
She's like,
know.
nose booger suction.
I know. I'm just
She's like, get out the turkey baster suction.
you guys are aggressing.
The other thing is too is when you leave the hospital, I don't feel bad anymore. I used to feel really bad when they're like, take everything that is open, because honestly, they're gonna throw it away. So
They have
I'm
to.
gonna
Yeah.
take everything. So you would not believe how many little emergency kits I've been able to make up for our vehicles with like tape or
No, I know, like scissors. They
God.
throw out the scissors. I
Oh
was like,
yeah.
"You throw these scissors away?" They're like, "It costs
Yes.
too much to clean them." I was like,
Huh?
"Okay, I guess."
Even a little bin. That's how we
Yeah.
organize all
The
of our
bins.
supplies or the bins that they've
That
given
is
us
super
every
smart
time
to
for
make emergency
emergency.
kits. Yeah, the other thing I do is just as an FYI, so you know how we get the backup G tube? I give whenever they expire, I was like, "Here, nurses at the school, this is what it looks like. Go play with it. PCAs, go play with it." So that you feel comfortable doing it in the time frame that you need it because it's expired. So we're going to
Blow
be
it up.
receiving.
Blow the little balloon up. Get a feel for it.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's super smart.
That's funny because I have a training kit like that too. I didn't think about that I use one of our backup things for. That is so interesting to people too. Like that's how it works.
And
Yes.
that's what's inside.
I bring it.
there.
So I also do at the beginning of the school year, the new classrooms. I ask if I can come in and talk about safety, and they always say the number one question that they get is, "What's that feeding tube machine do, and how does that sit in her stomach?" So when I show them, like, here's what it looks like in her stomach, it just pumps it in, and they're like, "What?" So you can use it for that too. So those are, for the extras.
Yeah.
Yes.
So any other tips and tricks that you have before we close out? Because us, we just jump in our car, or there's somebody close by that can loan us something. Anything else that you can think of?
The only other thing that I know that we have put into place too is also creating a go bag. Having that go bag is really important for us. And I actually have 3 go bags that go with us because I've
Yeah.
got an emergency first aid go bag. I've got Addie's extra tube go bag. One of the things that we discovered when we go to the local hospitals here is Addie is a really tough stick for an IV. She's super spastic. And as soon as that needle goes in, she twists and they blow everything. Gillette has the no-no boards. I don't know what the technical term for them is, but we were able to get some no-no boards. And
Mhm.
so we carry those in our go bag.
Okay.
I don't know what a no-no board is.
That's like the no-nos, like where it
Oh,
like
oh,
no
so they can't.
to bend their arms. Yeah. And so it holds their arm in place so you could get an IV.
Yep. And those no-no boards, they help so much because, yeah, she's locked in place then. Otherwise, it was literally 5 people holding her down. And maybe 10 sticks later, we were even going
I know.
in like the side of the leg or the side of the
It's
neck.
traumatic.
sometimes.
Yeah.
It's awful. Then people are nervous to go up against her because they don't work with people like my daughter very often.
Yeah.
The go big has been really important. It's
Mm.
really nice. We've had situations where I think, Trum, I was telling you, we were down in the cities and we had stayed at a hotel with family for a Christmas thing. And we were on like the 7th or 8th floor. And all of a sudden, the fire alarm went off. And firefighters are coming in and evacuating the building. And after that experience, first of all, we don't stay on the 7th floor anymore. We ask for the
Mhm.
lowest possible level. We have a plan and we also have the go bag with us because if we would have had to leave all my daughter's equipment up in that
Mm.
room, we would have had nothing to help her if we were in our vehicle for a long time. Thankfully, that
Mhm.
situation ended up very well,
But that's a really good tip, though. When you are staying in a hotel, don't opt for the nice view. Like, just stay on the lower level.
yes. Yeah, those
Yeah, I always say away close enough that I can also bring in her equipment because it's like 10 trips in.
Yeah.
So, right. So I always ask for that as well. Thank you, Morgan, for taking
Yeah.
the time because we only have the city perspective. So it was helpful to hear above and beyond what you have to think about living a little further out. And you do have longer wait times for a lot of things. So this was a helpful, hopefully, tidbit. I think you and I also talked about it as you may not today, like when we were drowning in it, right? When our children first got diagnosed or were in crisis mode, some of these things are not achievable to do right away. But as you're in downtime to create that binder, it does help in the long run, whether it's a Google Doc but printing it out. I always forget to print it out with me every time I go to the doctor. I'm like, oh, hold on, let me go into the Google Doc and tell you about her medicine. So it is nice to have, especially when you have inpatient where you're having to hand over that binder. All these tips and tricks of meeting your community, right? None of us were ever meant to do this alone. I think that's the biggest thing. You're creating your village of people who want to help. Like that's why they volunteer to be an EMT or whatever. I think this is awesome how you've tied your community together to help be an advocate for Addie. Thank
Well,
you for being on today.
thank you. This was awesome. And so much of this information can apply to not only living in a rural community, but to anybody. There's so many great little tips you provided us. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys very much. I was so excited to be on today.
If you liked today's topic or have comments, questions, or thoughts on what else you would like us to cover, please visit rarelyfamiliar.com or connect with us on all the social channels. Resources will be listed in our show notes, and we'll be back next time with another discussion around living life successfully with rare medical complexities. Thanks for joining us on the journey.